through their landlord. The fees would be the same, and they still would have access to on-site parking, whatever on-site would be available for that property. That's the first step.
As well as off-street permits through the village still.
Correct, in the off-street lots as available.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. But when we look at our goals of trying to increase access, that's something specific to that goal. There's definitely a supply available. It's opening it up to the general public, providing access to that supply. Do you have any? Let's pause on that for a minute. Any thoughts?
I had some questions on.
Sure.
Where are the current, I know we have zones, there's so many permits by certain blocks, like on Oakland, Wilson. What's the potential, what is existing need, but what is how many units are in those areas? Do we have an estimate of how many people could move in the coming years to the street? I mean, we got River Park Court, it's 500.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
know the occupancy of the apartment buildings, it's high right now.
Right.
So as far as new absorption, that's information I think would be relevant for the report, just to understand. I mean, it'll be stale at some point in time, but for
Yes.
decision-making purposes
Right.
now, if we know that it's, say, 98% occupied, the rental units, and there's only 2% absorption over the next, whatever.
And the reality is, that's really just turnover as people move in and out. Most the major apartment complexes are really just 98% full, just because people,
Well, are you concerned
I'm
about
concerned.
like an
Capacity.
onslaught of people?
Yes, as units turn up, people may already live there, don't have a car. But as the years, a couple years
Right.
down, people go, oh, I can get 2 spots on the street.
Yeah.
We've got this side streets along Oakland Capitol, that the residents are already like out of their mind with the cars on the streets. This could be
3 times,
all the
yeah.
way out, blocks. I mean, you look south in Milwaukee, what's the potential impact on the residential streets around these?
And that's a good point. And so you're looking for essentially a mathematical answer, an arithmetic. What's the capacity and what's the demand?
Because there's a maximum. I mean, you can assume there's 5,000 residents in apartment buildings. You can assume 1 car per resident. That's like the possible maximum. And then there's a realistic actual number in there. And then it really comes down to what's the village want to do? Do we want to be hospitable and open and provide access to everyone, or not?
Yeah, just like the lake, the
'Cause
Harley building.
yeah, people are gonna complain that don't want cars on the street,
Right.
but I guess from an elected official standpoint, you have to weigh if those complaints are valid or not.
Yeah,
I mean, because at the end of the day, what I keep wondering about is some people assume inherently that cars on the street is a bad thing.
yeah.
I don't personally agree with that, and that to me is another issue to kind of address through education
Right.
and perception versus reality. So even if we did dump 3,000 more cars on the street, is that automatically a negative? Maybe, maybe not.
And I would
I don't
say
know.
the 3,000
I
from
mean, I don't know what the
that's
number is, but I mean, I don't, to your point, it would be helpful to know
with the
Where people,
what are we currently issuing in terms of parking permits, especially in those zones that are within a block of multi-story apartment buildings,
correct.
and say, is that, we're already giving 50% of the residents a parking pass, 20%, 90%, I don't know, I mean, do we have any idea? Is that part of this?
we can get that information. We have
We
information on
definitely,
the process.
We definitely know, I mean, I don't know it offhand, but Diane definitely knows how many permits we've issued to so many apartment buildings.
By building.
I don't know if we know that it's, 50% of the units have it or what it is, but I feel like if we had the addresses, we could easily look at how many units are in that building and come up with that number of,
Right.
Units per.
right. So I think that's a good comment and we can,
And each building is different.
We should definitely
So-
know, because, I mean,
Yeah,
by not knowing, that could
Correct.
make it seem like we're not.
There are two ways to
looking
do it.
into
You can
that,
look at
but-
current, the process where the landowner, the landlord has a limited number of permits that they can control. That may be different, the ratio may be different from another building. So there's one way, you could look at and see what actually they have under control now. Or we can look at the number of units and use a land use planning ratio that is separate from what is currently being implemented, and say, there are 400 units, and of those 400, a planning ratio, there are X amount of surface spaces on site for the properties. So therefore, assuming 1-to-1, one car per unit, there would be a need of, let's just say, 300 spaces in the market if they chose to park, on street.
Mhm.
And that, I think that information would be helpful.
Yeah, it would be.
You would, because I think the magnitude, some people can go to the nth, to the biggest, to the worst.
Yeah.
3,000 cars descending. Others, may say it's very local. Long as I have a spot, I'm not going to worry about it. But just getting an understanding of what that magnitude, that potential impact would be, because part of it is the cost to go on street. We don't recommend changing that. That's a valuable, valuable curb space.
What is the cost?
Oh.
So in the off-street lots, it's $50 or $75 for 24 hour space. I don't know on-street if the bumpers are the same price.
50 a month
Correct.
Yeah.
for off-street?
Yes, which is considerably higher than Milwaukee, for example.
Yeah,
50.
because Milwaukee's only $60 for the
For
year.
the full year, something around there, yes.
So what's it to get a street parking permit?
In Shorewood.
Shorewood.
It's
Yeah,
Oh, it's
for-
50 as
yeah,
well.
yes.
Okay,
Per month.
Why do we not want landlords to sell them versus the village to sell the permits? What's the difference there? It's more work for the village.
There's actually,
There must be a
there are
cost.
pros to it as well, as
Mhm.
far as, collecting the money directly from the user, as opposed to through the landlord, which, sometimes is
No
timely,
person.
sometimes it's not.
Mhm.
Also, having direct access to the information, and to make sure that the permit is credentialed or turned off, directly,
True.
as opposed to through, it's one more
One less
step.
person, right.
is there a
That makes-
central database?
There is a permit
that-
software program through, yes.
Is that what we're using now?
Yes.
And can a tenant go online and purchase directly?
You don't qualify.
No.
They aren't eligible at this point.
They
Are
currently
you
pur-
recommending that that's what we do?
Yeah,
Yes.
they
Okay.
currently purchase it through their landlord, who's given a limited supply of permits to give out, and then the landlord gives us the information that we would enter.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay.
but we have a system that could support this
Yes.
today. We
Yeah.
just haven't
There'll be
opened it up.
some modifications to
Okay.
the software,
So-
but right now,
That
the
seems way more straightforward.
if you're just looking at a critical path analysis, we're just taking one step. And now,
Keep the minimum rule.
putting yourself in the shoes of landlords, though, why would they want that? From a
Right.
marketing standpoint, it's nice to know what you have, to be able to communicate to potential tenants, as opposed to, here's a wonderful place to rent. You're gonna have to go to the village for parking, because on site we're sold out. We have a waiting list on site, hypothetically. It may be easier for them to say, we do have a few passes here remaining, within our pool, and you're eligible for those. And I'm just trying to play both sides.
If it's restricted,
If it's restricted.
yeah.
Yeah, it's correct. But if it's open, if it's free market, and they're treated equal to, a resident, as far as access to supply,
Mhm.
people can choose to use it or not.
Yeah, cause I have experience both as a landlord
Mm-hmm.
for anecdotal evidence here, so I used to manage, and still do manage a lot of properties in Milwaukee. Very simple, parking's available, just pay your $60.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they're like, cool.
But essentially, it's a
In
hunting
Shorewood?
license, right?
No. Shorewood, I managed 2 duplexes, and the question was, where do I park? You don't.
You go look.
Well, wait, what do you mean? You can't. Well, the closest lot is 3 blocks away in a school. Well, I'm not gonna park there. what do I do with my groceries? What do I do with my kid? Well, I know, too bad. That's what I'm looking to change. I mean,
Right.
that just doesn't seem fair when the street is empty in front of this for 4 blocks around.
Telling Diane this morning, I think that's probably the comment we heard the most in this whole process, that exact comment.
Right, I mean, that to me, like, I think we definitely need to be armed with data to address
Mhm.
the 3 or 4 critical
Right.
zones that could theoretically have a lot more cars added to the street.
Yes.
But then, I think what I'm hearing here is you're recommending though, that basically village-wide, including all the way over on the east side of the village. where
Impacts would be
it's
greatest
not-
off,
It's not gonna be highly adopted over
Right.
there, but still, someone who does have a duplex and maybe currently does not have off-street parking for all their residents, they could start seeing a handful of cars parking on the street.
Right.
Yes, and as far as details, you know, how many permits are allocated or available, you know, there's been discussion right now, if somebody in a duplex applies, there are 1 per unit, 1 permit per unit. So if you have a 2-unit property, that's what they'd be eligible, and if a surface lot is within 2 blocks, that is the first tier where they're, you know, allocated. There may be a wait list there. If they're beyond 2 blocks, if a surface lot is beyond 2 blocks from the duplex, then the village customer service will look at giving them an on-street permit. The process,
That seems like
Which
a
we're-
whole lot of
which we've,
keeping track.
each time it's very, yes, and so each
And
time,
measuring and verifying and.
Right, and the reason we would wanna even explore that is because of resident pushback.
Of what component?
Of just, instead of just
Oh,
going through all that
walk around.
rigmarole, just saying, yeah, if you want a spot, you can have a spot.
and we were talking earlier
I mean,
about,
did what you just said come out of the meetings this morning, or are you?
there were some that had mentioned, they're playing devil's advocate, what would be a risk? Somebody from another community who doesn't live here, who isn't a resident, would get an on-street permit.
Well, they can't get a permit because they're not a resident.
No, but say let's just hypothetically, let's eliminate that it's just open.
Oh, that anyone in
You
the
live in
world can
Milwaukee,
get a
why
permit
would you get a
spot?
permit in
Well,
Shorewood?
Yeah.
Yeah, you wanna.
You
Well,
live in
unless you're on the
Whitefish, why would
border,
you get a
because
permit?
Once a month, I don't think so.
Yeah, no,
So-
no, I guess I'm thinking
Especially
more
at
of,
cost.
you know, trying to verify whether or not you're 2 blocks of this or 1
Yes.
block of that. I mean, I think it makes perfect sense. You're a resident and you need a spot, okay, that's fine. I don't see a lot of reason to
To go through a hierarchy.
micromanage it and try to put that on staff or customer service to, cause I'm guessing the software's not gonna be able to figure that out.
No.
You know, the
It's
less we
on
can
that
make
individual.
staff do, I think, the better, unless there's some good reason to not, to restrict people from getting getting an on-street spot. I just doesn't make a
And
lot of
that's
sense.
just hopefully we don't run out of parking spots. Then where do they go?
Correct. What's the alternative? What, you know, where are they going to park? Correct.
That's always been an issue here.
Mhm.
Run out on the street?
Yeah, if we run out of on-street parking as well, as a lot, I always worried about that, I've been here for 30 years and I think, what's gonna happen when
Well,
there's
I
no
don't
place
think
to park?
that's,
Mhm.
That won't even be an issue.
well, you just, you would
Yeah,
have
There
to,
still
you
is
would
a
have to
cost
park
to it,
farther
so if that was
away.
the case, you could increase the cost to the point where people aren't choosing
Right.
to do that.
There you go.
In some cases, I mean, even when back in the day, when I lived on the east side of Milwaukee and paid for on-street, sometimes I still had to park 3 blocks
Blocks
away.
away, right.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's a reality down there because you have 4 blocks
That's-
filled with
yes.
5-story apartment buildings, you
Mhm.
know. We only have a couple of zones, so yeah, maybe in 50 years, you know, if the village decides.
We don't
to-
envision it getting anywhere near that level, but agreed, we need to dig into the numbers a little bit more,
Yeah.
but we're not talking 3,000 cars, we're not talking full blocks village-wide.
Yeah.
A little spillover from Capitol and Oakland, yes, probably, but we're not envisioning a wholesale,
Because-
everything's full
Even some
everywhere.
of the duplex areas,
Yeah.
Bartlett behind Walgreens, I mean, those are similar housing distribution as South Maryland as you drive into the university.
Yeah,
I
there's
mean,
probably a pocket, because I know I live in the northwest corner
Yeah,
on
there's,
Sheffield and Kensington, and almost everything, I mean, I walk my dog around our neighborhood,
Right.
I mean, almost every property has parking for 2 to 6 cars,
yeah,
you know?
right,
There's probably a handful of duplexes that might be
Right.
interested in this, cause all they have are, you know, a 1-car garage and a 1 parking slab off an alley, and
right.
it's a duplex, you know, so then maybe that place, 1 out of 10 on the block, you know, might have a tenant. who
And there
wants
still is
to
a
stop.
cost to it, so they might say, I've been getting by without doing it till now, to save $50, I'll still get away with doing it, but if it really is worth it to them,
Yeah,
Convenience or, you know,
Yeah.
trumps the,
So does Milwaukee limit the number of permits, like in a duplex along Maryland, so as
well,
long as they can show residents?
I don't know if they're around the university,
Yeah, it's-
maybe they
do you
might.
have to prove residency in Milwaukee? I've gotten permits several times, and I could tell you, I don't know that I've ever had to prove
I think
prove residency.
technically, yes.
You
You're
just-
supposed to
maybe
be
I
able-
check off
you're supposed
that I
to
give my
show
address,
a
but I don't-
lease
yeah.
or
You
something.
can do it online, I don't
Typically,
know
what
that
it
I've
is
ever-
your license,
Oh, you're
so
licensed.
it's entered into the system within your, and then you
Yeah.
type in your residence, where are you living,
Licenses.
whether it's a rental or it's your permanent, you're paying a mortgage on it, or you own it.
But to that point, the car that I enter is actually owned by my sister, who does not live in Milwaukee.
It's just the number that goes into a credential system, so when they scan it, you're valid, you are legitimate within the
Yeah,
system.
okay.
That's not to verify through the Department of Motor Vehicle that that car is tied to you.
I just don't even think that they know that I
I
live in
know
Milwaukee.
it used to be you had to, before you could do it online, you had to go down to like District
Mhm.
5
Yep.
and you had to show a lease. You basically had to show
Yeah, yeah.
something
I did that too, but
to do that, but I don't know
that's
about that
old
actually.
now, I don't know that.
I should probably know that.
I probably checked off a box that says, yes, I acknowledge I live here, and
Then, you know,